everybody, Sean from Movie Assault here, and it is time once again for my end of month movie review, or review of the movies I watched last month. Last month was July of 2022, and I did watch 11 films last month. I probably would have watched more, but we had kind of a not a great month personally in the family. We did have a death in the family. My wife's mom passed away. So as you can guess, there was a lot of family stuff going on. Way more important than sitting around watching movies. So glad that everybody was able to get a chance to deal with that and whatnot. So so that did impact the amount of movies I could watch this past month. But I'll run down through it. This was kind of a fairly mediocre month for movies. I did not see too many movies that were great, but I did see one movie that was absolutely fantastic, and I'll get to that. But the first movie that I watched for the month of July was Funny Farm from 1988, starring Chevy Chase and Madeline Smith. And I had only seen this movie once before, and that was back when it was released in 1988. I actually saw it at a drive-in, and I don't remember much about it, or I didn't remember much about it, other than the fact that I didn't think it was that funny. But I sat down and rewatched it with my wife, and I kind of liked it. It was sort of almost like one of the National Lampoon Vacation films, but less so, I guess. The style of comedy wasn't quite as outrageous, but it was still funny, and there was still some really kind of bizarre humor in it. But I gave it 3 stars. It was funny, forgettable, but funny. So I enjoyed it. Then I watched Thor, Love and Thunder from 2022, obviously. I went to the theater to see that. And I don't know if you're like me. I love the MCU, but I'm starting to get a little burnt out on all the different plot lines and all the different scenarios and the multiverse and all that kind of stuff. And I really loved Thor Ragnarok, the last Thor movie. But I think the Phase 4 films, they just really haven't been doing a lot for me personally. Doctor Strange was okay. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Spider-Man Far From Home was great. But Thor, Love and Thunder, I really thought it was a missed opportunity. It almost got too carried away with the stupid humor. I want to hesitate and say, I want to hesitate before I say that I didn't like it, because I did like it. But I'm just kind of getting burnt out on all the superhero movies. And maybe you're with me, maybe you're not. Maybe you're like, what are you talking about? Every superhero movie is fantastic. I don't know. I think that we could all probably use a break from the MCU, and apparently that doesn't look like that's happening since they announced phases 5 and 6. And I'm letting that maybe affect my opinion of how I'm, or at least how I'm describing my opinion of Thor, Love and Thunder. But of the actual movie, the problem I had with it is that the humor was just, it was so over the top stupid, and made Thor look like such a lunkhead when he was more serious, and like Dark World and the original Thor movie, those weren't as enjoyable as Ragnarok, but they didn't make him look like an idiot. Maybe sometimes, but only because it was like the fish out of water. But now he's just like the lovable dumbass. And I don't know. That maybe it's rubbing me the wrong way. I don't know. But I gave it 3 stars. The next film I watched was on Prime Video, and it was called The Creature from Big Muddy, an Illinois Bigfoot legend. And this was on Prime Video. And if you're familiar, if you watch Bigfoot documentaries, now I'm a self-described addict to these goofy Bigfoot documentaries. I love watching them. My wife makes fun of me constantly because I have this goofy addiction to watching all these dumb Bigfoot documentaries. Some of them are okay. Some of them are terrible. This one was more forgettable than anything. But there's a series called the Small Town Monsters movies by a guy named Seth Breedlove, and he's actually from my neck of the woods in Ohio. I've actually met him several times. And his movies are okay. They're more like introductory movies to the subjects that he's describing. So they're a great first place to start if you're not sure, anything about Bigfoot or the Mothman or Momo, or I'm trying to think of some of the other things that he's done, the Bray Road Beast, things like that. But definitely check out the Small Town Monsters series. A lot of them are available on Prime, either for free or for rental. And some of them have been released to physical media as far as I know. But those are good. This one is in a very similar style to that type of movie, but it's really kind of forgettable. I had to actually look up. I only saw the movie about a month ago, and I had to re-watch the trailer to kind of spur my memory about what it even covered. And it covered a sort of a flap of sightings in the 70s in Illinois. But I couldn't tell you anything remarkable about these sightings other than they all took place in and around a park. And this park that they show in the movie kind of looks like a road that goes into the water. It's very weird, but it was pretty mediocre, so I only gave it 2 stars. But it was directed and written by Joseph Turry, and I don't know that name. I had never heard that name before, but he has made some other documentaries dealing with paranormal stuff. Next, I watched The Frisco Kid with Gene Wilder and Harrison Ford. I did show this in my pickups video for July 2022. Great movie if you're a fan of Gene Wilder. If you're just looking for something knee-slappingly hilarious, it's probably not going to do the job. It's very subtly funny. It's a Western, but it's nothing like Blazing Saddles. So if you hear Western and Gene Wilder and you think Blazing Saddles, this is not that. But it is funny. He plays a Jewish rabbi who is sent to America. He's actually sent from Poland to San Francisco, and he has to make his way across the country, across the United States, from Philadelphia to San Francisco. And he runs into a whole bunch of misadventures, I should say. And along the way, he meets up with a bank robber played by Harrison Ford, then they strike up sort of this odd friendship. And I enjoyed it. I saw it when I was a little kid, and I really liked it, probably because the humor was kind of goofy. As an adult, I found the humor less funny, but I found the movie more lighthearted and kind of emotionally engaging. It's still silly, but it's worth a watch. I gave it 3 stars. Then I watched the worst movie I've seen all year. Absolutely the worst movie I've seen all year. One of the worst movies I've seen in a very long time. And it's really hard to find. And I actually had to pay money to watch it on streaming. My sister-in-law was in town because of the aforementioned issue in the family. And she had said that she wanted to watch this documentary called Willows Wee. And there's a longer version of the title, but it's not even worth looking up. It's called Willows Wee. It was made in 2022 it was directed by a guy named Billy Lewis, and it was written by Billy Lewis and a guy named Dave Spinks. First and foremost, before I even watched the movie, I noticed that there was actually a Facebook group discrediting the whole movie, so that's probably not a good sign. But it's about a haunted house, supposedly haunted house somewhere in Indiana. And it's supposedly one of the most haunted places in America or on Earth or something. It's a poorly made movie. It's totally garbage in terms of the way it's constructed. Based on what I read in the Facebook group, a lot of the stuff is completely falsified. My wife got mad at me because I told her that before we watched the movie, so she couldn't even enjoy it because she didn't even get the illusion that any of this crap was real. But it's from some streaming network called scarenetwork.tv, and I paid like $3 to watch this just because my sister-in-law really wanted to see it. She was disappointed when I let her know afterwards that all of this stuff is probably crap. So I probably ruined the experience for both my wife and my sister-in-law. I'm sorry. I apologize. But I'm trying to save you guys from it. Don't watch it. It's garbage. And unfortunately, this scarenetwork.tv, whatever it is, features a lot of movies made by these same people, and I expect that the quality on those is probably just as bad. So stay away from those. Unless you want to subscribe to this network or pay and watch these terrible movies. And when I say terrible, they're not even so bad they're good. They're just garbage. Then we watched to cleanse the palate, we watched The Great Outdoors, which is sort of a family favorite. I've only seen it like 3 times, but the first time I saw it at the drive-in, coincidentally the same summer that I saw Funny Farm. And again, I didn't think too highly of it. But then I watched it with my sister-in-law and my wife a couple of years ago and found myself enjoying it a lot. And then we rewatched it this past month, and now I've kind of grown to like it. It's kind of it's endeared itself to me, I guess, is one way to put it. But it stars Dan Aykroyd and John Candy. John Candy's taking his family to a summer vacation spot in Canada, and they're kind of not that excited about it because it's in a cabin, but it's where his father took him when he was a boy, and he's trying to pass that sort of same type of memories on to his son. But then Dan Aykroyd, who is his brother, I believe. I can't remember their exact relation, and that's terrible. But maybe his brother-in-law. I'm not sure. I'm 100% not sure on that because, like I said, it's a movie that I've seen a couple of times, but it's one of those movies you don't need to memorize and really don't have to pay all that much attention to it. It's just a lot of zany skits, basically from end to end. But anyway, he comes up and he tries to impress John Candy's children, and he's sort of a big mouth and a blowhard, and he's playing the part like he's super rich. So he's kind of juxtaposed against John Candy's more modest, kind of, loving father figure type. It's funny. If you like that kind of humor, John Candy, Dan Aykroyd, you kind of know what you're going to get into. It was written by John Hughes, but it was not directed by John Hughes, so it kind of misses that John Hughes spirit, but it's still pretty good. I gave it 3 stars. Then I went to the theater and I saw Nope, the new movie from Jordan Peele, starring Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer and Stephen Yeun. I don't want to say too much about this movie other than go see it in the theater. Don't wait for it to come to home physical media, but definitely pick it up when it does. But this is a movie you really need to see on a big screen. The cinematography is fantastic. This is the biggest budget that Jordan Peele has had to work with. If you're familiar with his previous films like Get Out and Us, you're sort of going to find yourself in the same kind of a headspace with this movie. It's got some social commentary to it. But this, I think it's a little less blatant. You can kind of put it in the back of your mind and just sort of watch this as a special effects blockbuster horror movie, science fiction horror movie. It loses quite a bit of richness if you do that, but it is possible to do that, because I know some people, for whatever reason, say they don't like Get Out and they don't like Us because of the political commentary or whatever. I'm not one of those people, but Nope is really a good movie. It's got a lot of surprises, got some decent scares. There's one scene, I'm trying not to give anything away, but there's one scene featuring Stephen Yeun's character as a child that's absolutely bone-chilling. So I absolutely recommend Nope. Gave it 4 stars. That is not the best movie that I saw this month. The best movie I saw this month was Everything Everywhere All at Once. I talked about this in my pickups video as well. Again, I don't want to spoil too much about it, but it's just go into it not expecting to grasp what's going on for maybe the first 45 minutes of the movie. Going in, I think it's good not to know what's going on. And just let the movie kind of wash over you and introduce all these different concepts about the multiverse and everything. But when it boils down to the end of the movie, it's definitely a movie about family, what's really important. But this is the type of movie, and this is one of the best compliments I can give a film. This is the type of movie that I love to watch movies to see. That makes me love going to the movies, watching movies, enjoying movies, because it takes all the conventional stuff about movies and just turns them on their ear. So Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, best movie of the year so far. 5 stars. And it was written and directed by Daniel Scheinert and Daniel Kwan. Definitely see it. And then I rounded out the end of the month with 3 movies that are sort of similar, at least in terms of what, not really the time period, but 2 of them are. But I watched one movie called Beast from Haunted Cave, which came out in 1959. Stars Michael Forrest and Sheila Noonan. It's sort of it's a Roger Corman, an early Roger Corman film, and it's sort of a heist movie with a monster movie sort of shoehorned into it. I watched it on one of the Roger Corman collections that I picked up at Dollar Tree, and I really enjoyed it. It's kind of silly, and the monster movie part of it is the least successful part of it. The heist movie is actually kind of engaging, but the two don't really fuse together that well. If it would have been a straight heist movie, it probably would have been more enjoyable. And from what I understand, it was made sort of in the same vein as another movie, which the name escapes me, with a very similar, if not almost exactly the same plot. So I may have to look that movie up and go see that, or find a way to see that movie. And I'll put it on below the movie that I'm talking about, because I can't remember it off the top of my head. I know several critics who have reviewed Beast from Haunted Cave have referenced the name. I just can't remember what it is, and it didn't ring a bell. But it's basically about these bank robbers, or yeah, I guess they're bank robbers. They sort of stage this whole scenario where they can rob a bank, and they plant explosives in what is supposed to be an abandoned gold mine away from a ski resort, to sort of divert the police to head out that way and get away from the bank, because this is a small town and whatever. But what they end up doing is they release this monster that lives in the gold mine, and it starts killing people. And there's a little bit more to the plot, but that's mainly all you really need to know if you're interested in watching it. I kind of enjoyed it. It's not really well made, but it's an interesting movie. I gave it 2.5 stars. I enjoyed it. Next it was a documentary called The Creep Behind the Camera. I watched this. This was made somewhere between 2013 and 2014, but it wasn't released until 2015. And it stars Josh Phillips and Jodie Lynn Thomas. And it's the story of Vic Savage, who is the man that directed The Creeping Terror, which is the last movie I watched this month. And if you're familiar with The Creeping Terror, I'll kind of roll both of these into one. The Creeping Terror was made in between 1962 and 1964, and is considered one of the worst movies ever made. And it was made by this guy who called himself Vic Savage. His real name was Art Nelson, sometimes went by AJ Nelson. And this guy was a complete sleazeball, complete jerk. Not only was he a con man, and he conned a lot of people out of money, but he was also later in life a child pornographer, an adulterer, an abusive husband, just a really nasty guy. And he was a drug addict and an alcoholic and just a sleazeball. But he ended up making this movie, The Creeping Terror. And The Creeping Terror is considered one of the worst movies ever made because the special effects are terrible. He forgot to record the soundtrack, so there was no soundtrack when they found the actual reels and found the film. The guy that actually lent most of the money to him to finish the film never got the film back from him, so he discovered the reels in the guy's garage and had to salvage it to kind of recoup some of his money by releasing it. So he ended up having a narrator overdub the film and kind of narrate what was going on, because he couldn't read the lips in all of the scenes. There was no shooting script, so they didn't have any idea what the people were saying half the time. When they did, they got actors to dub lines over, so there is dialogue in some of the scenes, but most of it is narrated. But the pinnacle of the crappiness of this movie is the creature, the Creeping Terror, which looks like a walking carpet, basically a carpet thrown over people who walk underneath it. And when it attacks people, they kind of have to crawl into the monster suit to make it look like they're being eaten. You have to see it to believe it. The Creep Behind the Camera tells the story of the making of that movie. The Creeping Terror, which was the last movie I watched this month, is the actual movie. They're both available on one Blu-ray. You can find it if you look up The Creep Behind the Camera. You can find it on Amazon and pick up both movies on Blu-ray. The Creep Behind the Camera is available on Tubi if you want to watch it for free. I don't know if The Creeping Terror is. I just watched it because it was on the same Blu-ray. But one of the cool things about the Blu-ray is that they have a step-by-step study of how they built the recreation of the Creeping Terror monster, which is really interesting. And all I'll say is it looks like the combination of a carpet and male and female sex organs. So I'll just let you, you can Google it. Google what this monster looks like. It's absolutely hilarious. But I gave The Creep Behind the Camera 3.5 stars. I thought it was enjoyable. I have since learned after watching it that a lot of what is in it is not factual. There's a lot of things about the making of the movie that they sort of either made up or misattributed to somebody's story and gave it credence. So it's not exactly the most truthful telling of the story, but at least gives you enough background to understand how this guy operated. But The Creeping Terror from 1964, absolute garbage. I gave it 1 star. It is hilarious to watch if you like bad movies, but in terms of, you know, quality filmmaking, it's a 1-star film. So there you go. That is what I watched in 2022, July 2022. As always, if you've made it this far to the end of the video, I really do appreciate it. Thanks for listening to me ramble for 21 minutes. And as always, feel free to give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Share my channel. Please help me get subscribers. I would really appreciate it. And thank you very much. As always, take it easy.